Welcome back to the channel. This is Freddy Storm, and you are watching What If Naruto Sasuke and Sakura found Mewtwo. If you enjoy this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Not wasting no time. Let's start the story.
A 12-year-old Naruto sat slouched in his chair and moaned loudly. Where is he? The desk in front of him in the classroom held his head. Sakura and Sasuke were in the same room, both thinking similarly. The other Junin sensei had picked up their teams more than an hour ago, but theirs had not yet arrived. Because of a curriculum meeting that afternoon, even Iruka sensei had departed. It was allegedly set for a period of time after all the genin should have departed. When Naruto's patience finally gave out, he stood up and made his way to the door. Naruto halted and turned to Sakura, saying, "What are you doing, Naruto? We're supposed to wait here until our sensei comes for us." "Oh, come on," he begged, "this is stupid. We've been waiting for forever, and I want to do something fun. You can't just leave, especially not for one of your stupid pranks." Naruto unlocked the classroom door and left after saying, "I can, and I am. Now, you two can either come with me or stay here and keep being bored out of your mind." There was stillness for a few seconds before Sasuke got up from his chair and left the room as well. For a moment, Sakura remained still in her chair as a dispute raged inside her head. Not wanting to be left out, she finally did what the two boys did. Naruto laughed and rushed away from the shinobi that were chasing him, saying, "Get back here." Sakura and Sasuke trailed closely behind him. They were almost done using itching powder to booby-trap one of the western guard stations when one of the packets exploded too soon, letting the Chunin inside know what the three were up to. The pursuit went on until both sides were just inside the village's defensive walls, in the ring of woodland that encircles it. When they got into a particularly thick tangle of woods, Naruto recognized his opportunity and their pursuers momentarily lost sight of them. Taking advantage of this, he swiftly created 3 cage bushin and changed 2 of them to resemble Sakura and Sasuke. When his teammates realized his strategy, they hid among the surrounding shrubs. The unwary Chunin were led back towards the hamlet by the clones as they took off. When it was quiet in the jungle, the originals emerged to regain their breath. She responded by striking him in the head, saying, "See Sakura, we make a great team already." With a big bump already developing, Naruto held his bruised skull and asked, "You idiot, what's great about almost getting caught?" The two turned to Sasuke and said, "You intentionally triggered the powder too early." All afternoon, that had been the first thing he had said. Although it was more of a statement than a question, the orange-clad ninja nodded. Naruto and Sasuke exchanged glances, and it seemed as though they were having an unspoken discussion. "Yeah, course I did. The chase is the best part of a prank. What's the point of doing one if no one even knows it was you?" Naruto grinned as that brief encounter came to an abrupt end. The Uchiha scowled at him but remained silent, grumbling and choosing to lean against one of the many trees in the area. "Was the little run too much for you?" she said. Sakura was uncomfortable because she didn't know what had happened and wasn't sure what to say or do. She turned to go back into town after making up her decision. By now, hopefully, their sensei had arrived at the academy. She began to walk away, but Naruto interrupted, saying, "I wouldn't do that if I were you." He thought of something and walked up to her, saying, "Those guys will still be looking for us for a while. They don't know when to call it quits." He wanted to look cool, so he extended an arm to put it on the trunk she was standing close to. "So, Sakura, since we have some time to kill, you wanna ga?" he said. He didn't anticipate his arm going through directly and the rest of his body falling in behind it. The heads of Sakura and Sasuke whirled to where Naruto had abruptly disappeared. Uncertain of what had transpired, their bodies tightened as they each tried to maintain heightened awareness in case they were attacked. There were no indications of imminent danger as the moments passed. Sakura began to study the tree while Sasuke moved slowly toward it. Puzzled by the odd occurrence, she remarked, "I've never read about anything like this. It looks to be a sort of localized genjutsu that only affects this one tree. But why would there be a genjutsu on a tree trunk?" Sasuke concluded for her by asking, "And where is the person casting it?" When Naruto's disembodied head abruptly materialized directly in front of Sakura's face, they carried on observing. She shrieked and collapsed back onto her butt, saying, "Boo." Naruto's head burst into a shout of laughter. The remainder of the blonde's body emerged as he staggered out of the tree, clutching his sides due to his intense guffawing. "Ha ha 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 ha. You should see the look on your face, Sakura." After a while, he calmed down and gestured for the two to join him. Naruto vanished inside the trunk once more, saying, "Come on, don't you guys want to see what's in here?" There was stillness for a few seconds, and then Sakura got up off the ground first, Sasuke straight following her. Once within the tree, The two discovered themselves in the fairly claustrophobic interior. They didn't see anything particularly unusual when they looked about. Sasuke asked, "What are we supposed to be looking at, loser?" So far, nothing had seemed worth such an investment, even though the genjutsu had been strange. At that moment, he noticed a brief flash of red light. Sakura caught sight of it too, and they both pressed in for a closer look. The flash had originated from a medium-sized button on an adult's chest. She asked aloud, "What do you think this does?" The boys, unsure of themselves, shrugged. Genin writhed back and said, "Naruto, press it." She grinned at him and said, "What, why should I be the one to press it?" "Because you're the one that found this place, so you should get the honors." He insisted, "No way, you press it yourself. Are you kidding me? I'm not going to press a random button we found hidden in a tree. Come on Naruto, be a man." Sakura attempted to persuade him. "Ladies first." He got back at him. They kept arguing back and forth, neither of them eager to give the other the last say. Sasuke finally pushed past his teammates and slapped his palm against the button because he was tired of their rudeness. As soon as he did, the hardwood floor they were standing on started to collapse, dragging them terrifyingly quickly below ground. A few seconds later, the platform abruptly slowed down, knocking the three of them off their feet. They got up blearily. They were exhausted from the sudden tumble. Sakura, Sasuke, and Naruto surveyed the room. They remained in the same little space after the descent, but now the only light they had was the buttons flashing every few seconds. Naruto said, "Well, this sucks." He kicked idly at one of the sides to demonstrate his point, hoping to strike dirt or wood. "We just found a hidden hole in the ground with nothing in it." Rather, there was a metallic clang. He squatted down where his foot had connected after his interest was piqued once more. There was a surprise when the red light appeared again. He put his hands on the metal and shifted them around, searching for a method to open it, saying, "Hey, guys, I think there's a door here." The other two hurried to join him in his hunt, asking, "Damn it, where is the handle?" Once more, the sole source of light provided a response. When Sasuke noticed the straight line splitting the curving wall in half, he said, "They're sliding doors." He put his feet down, wriggled his fingers inside the fold, and tugged as hard as he could. The door swayed slightly on his side. Sasuke gritted his teeth and growled, "Grab the other side." Naruto hesitated for a second. In fact, Sasuke had just requested him for assistance. Grabbing the other door, he determined that gloating could wait until later. There was the grinding of gears and a rusty shriek. The two lads worked together to carefully pry apart the doors. The movement displaced the dust from its resting spot high above, causing it to shower down. Finally, unable to open any farther, they ceased moaning, and the noises were quickly drowned out by the genins' surrounding blackness. Sasuke and Naruto took a few seconds to catch their breath. Something must have been triggered by their forceful admission, since gradually, one by one, lights flickered to life, filling the space with a gentle glow. Even though they could hardly see what was in front of them, anything was preferable to the darkness. There was a huge, roomy cavern before the kids. The roof was circular and the walls were covered with metal panels. The floor was composed of dirt, with odd white lines delineating certain areas. They heard a faint whirling that sounded like machines turning on. First to enter the room was Naruto, then Sakura and Sasuke. They looked around in amazement. They had never heard of a location like it beneath the village. Naruto could feel the hair on the back of his neck prickle as they began their probe. He shook his head and pushed the feeling away, but something in the back of his mind warned him to leave. The three quickly discovered three more doors that resembled the one they had just left. The left-hand one led to what appeared to be a living space. There were two bathrooms, a kitchen, and a considerable number of beds inside. There was only a strange-looking equipment with a glass dome inside the chamber on the right. Other than that, it was deserted, so they walked out to the last door, which was right across from the elevator. "Leave this place." Just as the three were about to enter the entrance, a frightening voice echoed in Naruto's head, and they paused. His hands twitched uneasily as he turned to face the other. Sakura and Sasuke nodded, and the blonde gave a weak breath of relief. "Please tell me you guys heard that too." Naruto could tell by their expressions that they were as anxious as he was. Sakura stammered, Maybe we should go back." Naruto put on his brave face and saw an opportunity to play the hero. He smiled at the pinkette, and she felt some of her concerns subside. "No way. We're going to be doing stuff like this all the time now that we're ninja. I don't care what that stupid voice in our heads tells us. I'm going through." They gathered even closer and started moving forward once more. Naruto felt the sensation from before resurface as the three got closer to the final door, telling him to turn around. This was all that strengthened his resolve. It was clear that something was concealed here, and Naruto was resolved to discover what it was. Also, he wouldn't be since Sakura and Sasuke weren't. The strangest of all the rooms was the last one. Strange equipment flanked the front and rear walls, pulsing lights covering them and beeping and chirping at irregular intervals. Hundreds of red and white balls, roughly the size of a person's palm, lined several shelves on each side. The monster toward the back of the room, however, was the most peculiar aspect. It sat suspended in a reddish, orange liquid inside a tall glass tube. All over the vessel's body were wires that were fed from the top and bottom. The low light and fluid made it hard to see its color, but the stomach and tail of the monster were unmistakably darker than the rest of its body. Long, lanky arms crossed over its chest, and 3 fingered hands ended. Tucked up toward the body were strong, protruding legs. The shape of the thing's head was oddly feline. The face had a serene expression, as though it were in a profound sleep, and its eyelids were down. The 3 of them stood staring in awe as Sakura gasped at the sight of it. They had never heard of a monster like that. At the same time, they saw that what had begun as a straightforward investigation of an enigmatic tree had grown well beyond their capabilities. They needed to go right now and inform someone about this. The creature's eyes opened, a dazzling blue flame blazing inside, before any of them could even move. The gang went to their knees, grasping their skulls in agony as a searing sensation seemed to pierce right into their brains. Naruto could not recall ever experiencing such intense pain. Something seemed to be attempting to rip his head apart from the inside out. His body would not obey any of his frantic commands, and he was immobile. Until all 3 of them hit their breaking points, every second felt like an eternity. "Stop it!" they exclaimed, each voice ringing with a profound strength. The anguish came to an end as the fire in the creature's eyes went out. It gazed at the genin from inside its transparent cage, blinking in bewilderment. After the pain subsided, a terrible tiredness took its place. Naruto's limbs felt like lead, and his body felt feeble. He vomited on the ground and fell forward onto his hands. Sasuke and Sakura's retching sounds were faintly audible to Naruto. He could sense his last energy quickly ebbing away. The same voice kept ringing in the blonde's head, saying, "Quickly, choose one of these and press the middle button." In front of him, 3 of the orbs from the right side wall settled in a triangle after floating down. According to the voice, "Do it now," out of impulse. Naruto extended his arm slowly toward the person who was farthest distant from him. He cupped it in his hand and followed instructions. The spherical broke apart with a loud pop. The white shape that emerged was the last thing Naruto noticed before he passed out. Warm. As Sasuke Uchiha began to awaken, that was his first thought. A comfortable warmth was radiating from his right side to his midsection. For the first time in years, his entire body felt at ease. He hadn't slept this well since the night before the massacre 5 years prior. Sasuke dragged his eyelids open reluctantly. His first impression was of the creature from before, hovering cross-legged in midair with a blue aura surrounding its body. The Uchiha threw a bunch of shuriken at the beast and jumped out of the bed he was lying in a panic. He was aware that the warmth he had been experiencing vanished as soon as he took this action, but he set that aside for the moment. Sasuke was startled as the shuriken just halted inches from the creature's face and then fell to the ground rather than striking it. Sasuke's thinking was startled by the voice in his head, "Calm yourself. I mean, the 3 of you no harm." This was what had previously been in contact with them. When the number 3 was mentioned, he looked to his left and caught a sight of Sakura and Naruto's crude silhouettes resting on their own mattresses. Sasuke immediately returned his attention to the monster. He had no reason to believe it would honor its commitment. Minutes went by. Both of them remained motionless, allowing the room to be silent. Sasuke noticed movement in the corner of his eye, but it wasn't one of his teammates. There was a strange orange reptile on his bed with a fire blazing on its tail. The reptile showed no signs of being concerned by that last truth. All it did was extend out before curling into a more tightly packed ball. Normally, this would have made Sasuke even more vigilant, but his instinct told him it was not a threat. Besides, he was currently dealing with more serious issues. Specifically, a huge humanoid cat that was able to hover and halt Sasuke's attacks without opening its eyes. Sakura's awakening was signaled to the raven-haired guy by a feminine yell, and it appeared that she, too, had an unwanted visitor in her bed. She clamped herself to Sasuke's arm and was at his side in a moment. Without hesitating, he shook her off roughly. A scared girl should not be coddled at this time. It was the pinkette's scream that awakened Naruto. He did what Sasuke had done before, but he added a kunai and a cry of, "What the hell?" However, the outcome remained the same. Following the unsuccessful attack, the creature fell to the ground and then straightened itself, showing the kids it's amazing too. meter height. Naruto's mouth fell open as he asked, "Now that you are all awake, how did you three find this place? Did that freaky thing just talk?" Before Naruto could say something that would enrage the monster, Sakura managed to croak out, "We were in a forest clearing WH. When we found the entrance and decided to look around." The animal scowled. At this point, Naruto's courage had returned, and he pointed an accusing finger at the anthropomorphic cat, saying, "We were not meant to be awakened yet. Your exploration has set things in motion which cannot be undone." The blonde Jinchuriki said, "You're mad at us for waking you up? You're the one who made this place so easy to get into and then attacked us for no reason." However, the searing look caused his once strong confidence to wane. This vault was hidden deep below a dense forest, with the only entrance being through a 2-inch thick steel door, as well as multiple psychic barriers in place throughout the facility to prevent the random passerby from stumbling into here. If they are still able to gain entry, my semi-conscious self would continually place powerful suggestions within said person's mind to leave, while also manipulating their memory in order to assure them they were simply here in a dream. Should all else fail, a full-scale mental attack would be unleashed upon the intruder to disable and forcibly remove them from the area. Not only were the three of you able to bypass every countermeasure, you did so using something that should no longer exist. Sakura hesitantly rose her hand up, like she was asking a question in class. She said softly, "What was it that we used?" The creature's gaze was fixed on the ceiling. Before it responded, flashes of a bygone era passed across its thoughts. The power of dominance. The ability to control Poké copyright Mon. For the genin, the statement was unimpressive because they didn't know what it was. The monster kept talking after noticing their perplexed looks when it turned to face them. He clarified after each person shook their head in response to the question, "Do you know what a Poké copyright Mon is?" Mewtwo's eyes widened as three shapes were removed from the beds and placed in front of the psychic. Long ago, creatures known as Poké copyright Mon once roamed this world. "I am Mewtwo, the genetic Poké copyright Mon." The orange reptile Sasuke had previously seen was one of them. First, he pointed to that one. "This is Charmander, the flame Poké copyright Mon," said the middle one, which was on all fours and had an odd off-white hue with a short tiny tail at the back. It had a ring of little green pimples around its neck. A big leaf sprang from the top of its head. The final one on the right, Chikorita, the leaf Poké copyright Mon, had 4 legs as well, but it was blue and had a big fin on its head and tail. On its cheeks were strange orange projections. And Mudkip, the mudfish Poké copyright Mon. A note of irritation crept into Sasuke's voice as he asked, "What does this have to do with the power you were talking about earlier?" Every child's eyes opened when they heard the statement. Had it not been for them, all of you would have died. You three awakened the power inside of you to halt my mental assault. However, the power of dominance can only be used on Poké copyright Mon who have acknowledged you as their partner. After using its strength for the first time, my body rejected your hold on it. That left the power with nothing to anchor and stabilize itself to, so it began to drain from your bodies, searching for anything that it could bond with. There are only 9 Poké copyright Mon species in existence able to instantly forge a connection between themselves and a human. By your actions this day, for the first time in 1,000 years, humans and Poké copyright Mon are now bound together once again. There was a beast stirring deep within Naruto. Mewtwo's assault awoke the Kyuubi from its sleep, causing it to open a huge eye. When it saw a cage door in front of it, anger erupted. With a roar, the tailed beast banged a powerful paw on the bars. Refusing to acknowledge the pointlessness of its deeds, it continued to rage, smashing at every side of its new cage. The flaming rage eventually subsided and the fox returned to its icy contempt. The 9-tailed giant, now composed, began investigating its new prison and pushing the boundaries of the seal. It quickly learned that the beast could access its host's memories and senses through the dregs of its chakra that were leaking out. Initially, the Kyuubi searched the memories for anything it could take advantage of. The monster's face lit up with a huge smile at what it discovered in the latest ones. "So, this brat has discovered the last remains of my former kind. Perhaps he won't be as pathetic a meatbag as I thought." As he walked out of the room, Mewtwo gave the order, "Come, there is much I still must teach you and little time to do so." Sakura, Sasuke, and Naruto exchanged glances but remained motionless. Still unable to fully process what they had just been informed, they were all in a mild haze. But their new friends weren't, and they started pulling at the legs of their respective trainers. They were sufficiently roused from their stupors to follow this. They joined Mewtwo in the center of the room after leaving the living area and entering the central pavilion. Naruto asked the Poké copyright Mon a question as he said, Before we begin, I would like your permission to examine each of your minds. I wish to know how much the world has changed during our slumber. If you can look into our heads, why didn't you just do it instead of asking? Mewtwo lectured, the mind is a sacred place. For every being, it is the final refuge where they can retreat to escape the outside world. My psychic powers may grant me the power to peer into there, but I refuse to exercise it upon those who are unwilling and have not given me reason to do so. Therefore, I ask again, will you allow me to look into your minds? Naruto laughed in mild discomfort and rubbed the back of his neck. Well, if you want info about history and things like that, you should probably read Sakura's and Sasuke's minds, not mine. I was never really good at that kind of stuff. He detested having to acknowledge that. But he also wasn't very interested in the alternative. He too had recently discovered a very large, furry secret, and he did not like the thought of a creature he had just met finding out. Mewtwo chose not to pursue the issue after noticing the boy's anxiety. Sasuke gave the genetic Poké copyright Mon a resounding no when he turned to face the other two members of the group for their responses. He had hoped that all three would agree, but fortunately the girl was agreeable. They would have assisted in reinforcing the veracity of what he did learn, even if they had no new information. Sakura had something cross her head just as she was about to inquire as to what she should do. She took a few long breaths to calm herself after first panicking as she recalled what had happened the last time she had experienced this kind of emotion. Other memories started to flash before her mind's eye after she had done this. Though there were a few more, such different talks she had with her parents, the majority were of academy lessons. This went on until everything turned white, and then she was back in the room beneath the ground. Mewtwo stood in front of her with his eyes closed in concentration, while Naruto and Sasuke stood by her sides, appearing bored. Sakura flushed a little at the little compliment. Thank you, Sakura. This knowledge will prove to be most helpful. Naruto did not feel confident as he looked down at his own Poké copyright Mon. Your first lesson will be about the history of Pokémon. Next will be general tactics and type advantages. After that you will learn how to utilize the power of dominance properly. And finally, I shall teach you how to fight with your Poké copyright Mon. Are you sure about that? The fighting, I mean. They don't really look all that strong. Mudkip apparently took offense, leaping to his feet and using his tail fin to slap Naruto across the face. With a big crimson stain on his cheek, the blonde flinched back a little. Mewtwo used the incident to start teaching, saying, every Poké copyright Mon has the innate ability to fight, which has been instilled by thousands of years of natural selection. One of the reasons our species became entwined is because of this trait. Humans would pick Poké copyright Mon to battle alongside them in their own internal conflicts, often with disastrous effects, and the Poké copyright Mon would frequently receive food and shelter in exchange. During these dark times, the first method of catching Poké copyright Mon was developed. Humans would overpower Poké copyright Mon in the wild and force them into containers made for them, either alone or with the help of other Poké copyright Mon. It was soon found that once a Poké copyright Mon was caught in this way, it became more docile and willing to follow the instructions of the person who had captured it. The ancient Poké copyright Mon recognized the strength of their captors and agreed to stand with them, which was the basis for the power of dominance. A person who was able to do so was given the title of Poké copyright Mon trainer. The method for capturing Poké copyright Mon quickly spread, and soon every country had a large number of trainers who became the heart of their nations. With this new advancement came a problem, however. Trainers soon began to desert their kingdoms, for they were unwilling to see their partners die in the unending battles. The desire to fight is powerful though. Trainers and their Poké copyright Mon became restless, wishing to pit their strength against others but without the chance of losing their comrades. One day, a large group of the deserters found a solution. Together, they formed their own league of trainers. Members of this league would do battle against each other but only until one's Poké copyright Mon could no longer continue fighting. The killing of Poké copyright Mon was strictly banned for members and severely punished. After many years of wandering, the league finally found a place of refuge in the Indigo Plateau, a place not yet claimed by any kingdom due to the might of the wild Poké copyright Mon living in that area. Once a year, every trainer within the league would gather there and fight in a large tournament. The winner was crowned Pokémon champion and recognized as the strongest trainer in the lands. Life as a trainer was not an easy one though. Every country suffered a severe blow when the majority of their Poké copyright Mon trainers were lost. Trainers who refused to join a nation's army were hunted down, and the leaders were afraid of the strength they could acquire. The only place they could safely hide was the plateau where their yearly tournament was held. This became the hub of the league, and the sheer strength and quantity of trainers there deterred any outside attacks. Then, in desperation, the many nations convened a conference and decided to put an end to the fighting in the hopes that the exiled Poké Copyrightmon trainers would return to their countries. Most of them did, as they missed their homes during their banishment, but some stayed behind at the plateau to keep it up for the next tournament. Eventually, chaos started to spread throughout the world. Although the land and resource wars were over, Poké Copyrightmon continued to be an integral part of human society. Many Poké Copyrightmon possessed skills that were useful outside of the battlefield, and your kind's devotion to their life partners was unwavering. The return of the trainers and the end of the wars brought about a golden age that fueled massive technological advancements. With some trainers establishing state-funded hospitals for both humans and Poké Copyrightmon, others establishing gyms to teach the next generation, many returning to their jobs as peacekeepers, helping the local police forces of their home countries until they were once again the main branch of them, and a small number focusing on studying Poké Copyrightmon and learning everything they could about their friends and comrades. As the science of capturing advanced, it culminated centuries later in the Poké Copyright Ball, the round devices you saw earlier. As a result of their invention, the number of trainers increased exponentially because they were inexpensive, portable, and easy to use. Once a child turned 10, they were given their own Poké Copyrightmon and sent on adventures to prove their worth. Most of these new, younger trainers chose to do so by challenging the various gym leaders in the hopes of earning the opportunity to compete in the Poké Copyrightmon League championships of their continent, though this was not always the case. Others chose to become disciples at one of the various gyms, committing themselves to the teachings of their leaders. The power of dominance was initially identified by researchers during this new era, when it was believed that a Poké Copyrightmon's obedience to its trainer's commands was solely determined by its personality. What does all of this have to do with us, and why should we care? Just start teaching us how to use them to fight. Sasuke abruptly interjected. He didn't care about anything else, and he wasn't the only one. Sasuke had at least tried to maintain his concentration in case something crucial came up, but Naruto had been dozing off from the beginning, just like he used to do at the academy. Sakura was so absorbed in what Mewtwo was saying that she was actually the only one still paying attention. The Uchiha felt a chill go down his spine as the genetic Poké Copyrightmon gave him a cold gaze. This is your heritage. As the first Poké Copyrightmon trainers in this new world, it is your duty to understand where the legacy of those who came before you is. The power of dominance is not some trifle talent to be used like a simple tool until it inconveniences child. It is the manifestation of the bond forged between humans and Poké Copyrightmon through the fires of war and the stillness of peace over multiple millennia. By their own volition, the Poké Copyrightmon next to you saved your lives by choosing you as their new trainers. Should I see even a hint of you abusing this power, lord over them as a master does his slaves, you will learn a new meaning of pain. Mewtwo's voice was now echoing in the three Genin's head, his eyes lit up once more, and he floated above the ground, the air quivering with his rage. They backed up a little in fear, but it was unnecessary. Mewtwo had already begun to relax. He had to keep in mind that these kids weren't to blame for their stupidity. They had no knowledge of the Poké Copyrightmon world or the atrocities that alleged trainers had inflicted on their Poké Copyrightmon. He turned and floated to the back wall near the entrance that led to the area where the children had woken him up, saying, "Very well then. If you are so eager to fight, then we shall commence your battle training at once." Mewtwo waved his hand, and a panel slid aside to show a keyboard and screen, into which he started entering orders. Leaning towards Sasuke, Naruto murmured something loud enough for him to hear. Sasuke simply groaned in answer, but even he had to concede that the advice was wise. "Hey Sasuke, next time, try not to piss off the freaky cat with mind powers, okay?" After finishing up at the console, Mewtwo made his way back to the Genin. With a little movement of his hand, the several floodlights on the ceiling came on, casting a glare throughout the room. Typically, Poké Copyrightmon battles would consist of an individual or pair of Poké Copyrightmon facing off while receiving instructions from their respective trainers. This is because most trainers severely lack the strength and stamina required to participate in the fights themselves. However, the world has changed, and the path of the shinobi is one of constant struggle. You three will not have the luxury of directing from the sidelines. In the end though, that may prove to be more of a boon than a bane. The power of dominance was first formed in the midst of battle, so come, find that strength and fight. Mewtwo released a telekinetic blast with those remaining planets, causing the air to tremble. Sakura, Sasuke, and Naruto leapt quickly out of the danger, with their Poké Copyrightmon immediately after them. Knowing that this was his opportunity to showcase his skills, Naruto smiled. "You ready for this?" he questioned, glancing down at Mudkip. After receiving an enthusiastic nod, Naruto raised his hands and used his fingers to create a cross. To the amazement of everyone else present, Naruto exclaimed, "Okay then, let's do this." Kage Bushin no Jutsu. As his half of the dome began to fill with duplicates of the orange-clad ninja. "We're not done yet, Henge no Jutsu." Smoke burst from the clone collection, concealing Naruto's scheme due to its density. Charge. A throng of Naruto and Mudcups emerged from its depths. Naruto planned to eliminate Mewtwo by sheer force, just like he had done with Mizuki, so they all ran at him together. Mewtwo crossed his arms over his chest and stood erect. He swung his arms out to the side and let forth a strong psychic wave just as the clone's assaults were about to hit. The front rows of aggressors were flung back into the other waves by an invisible force that grew out of him. The counter momentarily confused the clone army, allowing Mewtwo to launch his own attack. He raised a hand and used his abilities to seize a Naruto and Mudkip from the crowd. He started talking after holding them in midair. Mewtwo flicked his wrist, sending the two crashing into the other clones, dispersing them while the originals absorbed blow after blow. An interesting technique, but futile against me. Your clones all have a thought pattern distinct from the real Mudkip in you. He just redirected his makeshift weapons to eliminate the genetic Pokemon while some of the clones raced forward once more in an attempt to hit him. After the Kage Bushin had been eliminated, Mewtwo's eyes flared and he slammed the Poke Copyright Mon and the defenseless trainer against the wall across from him, allowing them to eventually drop to the ground. The second he did, there was a deep rumbling. The earth around the group started to shake violently. Sakura and Sasuke looked around, unsure of what was going on. Crystals slowly started to form on the ring's outer edges and moved forward toward the center until a thick sheet covered the entire space. Out of the dirt inside the lines, huge spiky mounds of ice started to rise toward the ceiling. Before long, the arena had changed from a level area to a range of glacial mountains. Sakura inquired, "What just happened?" Mewtwo responded to them while standing calmly atop the tallest peak in the center of the room, saying, "This arena can be changed to mirror a multitude of different battlefields. Be prepared to fight on any terrain, for it may change at any time." Sasuke fled to join the battle after spotting his opponent. Charmander was running after him, attempting to keep up with his new trainer. Sasuke maneuvered between the gaps between each of the prominent figures. At last, he arrived at the center and began scaling its face. Climbing the steep mountainside was made even more dangerous by the fact that the entire mountain was made of ice. A yell from behind the Uchiha during his ascent signaled that Naruto had finally recovered and was joining the battle again. Knowing this made Sasuke even more determined to keep going and keep the loser from catching up to him. Now the boy with the raven hair was near the top. He leapt into the air toward his objective, securing his feet along a narrow ridge of ice. With the intention of kicking Mewtwo where he believed his center of mass to be, Sasuke twisted his body so his feet were leading him. However, he was dragged up by his ankle and left hanging in front of the statue before he made contact. Sasuke looked down to see Charmander far below, scrambling to ascend as quickly as his short arms and legs would allow. Attacking mindlessly is a fool's plan. You left behind your teammates to fight on your own. You are not even trying to work with your Poke Copyright Mon in this battle. The toddler fell and skidded back down the snowy slope as Mewtwo let go of him. Along the way, he and the Fire Poke Copyright Mon collided until they both struck the underside of a nearby butte. By this point, Naruto and Sakura had arrived in his location, and the Pinkette offered to assist him up, but she declined. In the end, that is what a Poke Copyright Mon battle is. Two sides working together to overcome their opponent. Only by working in tandem with each other are humans and Poke Copyright Mon able to attain their true potential as a team. The power of dominance is only a tool used to achieve this goal, but you are not even using that. Focus your minds. Reach out and feel the bond between you and your Poke Copyright Mon. The ground began to tremble and quiver once more. The surrounding ice started to melt and was swiftly reabsorbed into the earth. The temperature started to increase quickly. The burned and blackened remains of trees pushed through the earth to stand ominously over the Genin in place of the glaciers. All around, tiny fires ignited, warming the air even more. Now Mewtwo stood at the door of the charred ruins of a house, level with them. Mewtwo's apparently had no effect on the male ninja because Naruto and Sasuke charged at him as soon as the landscape calmed down. However, it appeared that they were at least attempting to incorporate their Poke Copyright Mon into their attack patterns this time. Sakura started to rush forward to offer assistance, but Chikorita stopped her when she put the bottom of her skirt in her mouth. Sakura turned back to face her companion. "What is it? Chikorita?" she asked, still unsure of how to respond to the grass type. The Poke Copyright Mon grinned and chirped, "Chika Chika." Sakura merely looked at her. Sakura asked, perplexed by what her Poke Copyrightmon was clearly attempting to tell her. Recalling what Mewtwo had just said, she made the decision to try it. The young girl closed her eyes and squatted down next the female Poke Copyrightmon, trying to feel what the psychic Poke Copyrightmon had been discussing. She became conscious of a feeling that was pulling her thoughts in that direction from the back of her head. Sakura gave a little gasp and grabbed for it in her mind. She sensed something. She was at a loss for words to express it. Though not exactly, it seemed as if she could hear the thoughts of another entity in her mind. They were mixed with instincts and emotions. Desires and sentiments blended into a single, constantly changing mass. And the power came next. It tingled the tips of her fingers and toes as it moved through her entire body. The force echoed of immense antiquity and majesty in her imagination. It pulled the girl farther into its arms while empowering and guiding her. Sakura opened her eyes and took in as much air as she could. Even though that moment had gone too soon for her, she could still feel it, lingering on the periphery of her awareness. Beside her, Naruto and Sasuke fell to the ground, their dual attack apparently failing. Sakura got to her feet and looked at Mewtwo. In her mind, Chikorita was telling her to go for it. She said, "Are you sure?" And the Grass Poke Copyrightmon gave a solid nod. Sakura ran straight toward Mewtwo after taking a final big breath. Chikorita accompanied her the entire time. As the gap shrank, Sakura threw back her hand and threw all of her energy into a single blow that struck Mewtwo square in the head. Instinctively, she simultaneously yelled, "Chikorita, tackle!" With her left shoulder leading, Chikorita leapt into the air and spun around to smack into Mewtwo. A psychic barrier prevented both attacks from reaching the legendary's body even a foot away. Sasuke, Charmander, Mudkip, and Naruto all rushed up behind her in an attempt to breach the imperceptible barrier separating them from Mewtwo. All six were lifted as Mewtwo's eyes flashed. They started to swirl around him slowly, getting faster with each turn. As the gang swung around, a huge shockwave blasted them all flying out of the psychic, ending their agony. Regardless of what they happened to crash into, their flights were abruptly terminated. In midair, Sakura caught Chikorita and pressed her to her chest. Fortunately, the two just hit the ground and rolled across the hard earth before stopping. Sakura staggered to her feet, her flesh displaying cuts and bruises where her clothing was exposed. Sakura grabbed Chikorita, but she wriggled free and fell to the ground. With haste, she said, "Rita, Chikorita." Sakura shook her head, attempting to understand her meaning. Although there didn't seem to be any issues with their connection, the statements Chikorita and the power were pressuring her to make didn't make any sense. She made the bold decision to put her trust in her lover. Sakura screamed, gesturing to Mewtwo, "Razor Leaf." The leaf on top trailed closely after Chikorita as she whipped her head in a circle. 4 more crescent-shaped leaves emerged from that leaf, slicing their way in the direction of the genetic Poke Copyrightmon. Mewtwo immediately rebuilt his psychic bubble to protect himself, instead of stopping completely when the razor-sharp blades struck. They were flung to the sides. Mewtwo was standing right beneath the charred husk, and the leaves readily tore into it and out the other side. Even though the strike didn't succeed, it caused enough damage to the house that its remnants fell on the psychic. After successfully inflicting damage on their opponent, Sakura pumped her fist. Her triumph was short-lived, though, as a tremendous explosion erupted from the flaming remains, throwing debris everywhere. Mewtwo was at its epicenter, standing erect and uninjured. He raised a hand, but a loud chiming was heard before anyone could move. Mewtwo loosened his stance as the ground engulfed the flaming platform. The sudden conclusion was a good surprise to the recently certified trainers. "That is enough fighting for now. Come, we shall tend to the wounds of you and your Poke Copyrightmon, then we will continue with your other lessons." Wondering what they had gotten themselves into, they walked slowly to the destination of their newest instructor. Upon leaving the basement complex's restroom, Naruto's pajama-clad body was softly enveloped in steam. He sighed with satisfaction as he stretched his arms and was relieved to get the perspiration and dust from a demanding training day off his body. He had woken up early yesterday afternoon, and the blonde stepped out into the bedroom area. There, Sasuke was lying on his back with his hands behind him under his pillow on the mattress that was the furthest from the restroom. Charmander was huddled close to his trainer's bed on the floor. Sakura quietly stroked the Chikorita nestled in her lap as she leaned against the headrest of the bed next to the Uchiha. Naruto barely hesitated before running and tumbling onto his own bed. He was able to readjust himself and land cross-legged and facing his teammates thanks to the ensuing bounce. Having been awakened by the motion, Mudkip leapt out from beneath the mattress and threw the recently minted Poke Copyright trainer to the ground. The room was filled with the sounds of excitement and laughing as the two partners started wrestling on the floor. Sakura glared at them and sighed. Naruto, stop playing around. We need to sleep. After the three of them had a day and a half, they most certainly needed it. Mewtwo handed them food to eat as they waited for their Poké Copyright Mon to recuperate after demonstrating how to use the odd, dome-shaped gadget they had previously seen. Evidently, the building had been equipped with nearly everything the three would require because it was designed to host both people and Poké Copyright Mon in case of emergency. Given that it had been down there for more than a millennium, it was astonishing that everything was in good shape. Mewtwo drilled the Poké Copyright Mon into the ground for the remainder of the day once they had finished recuperating. Despite hours of fighting, neither the Poké Copyright Mon nor the Genin were ever able to get a clear shot on the legendary. After a while, Mewtwo stopped the fighting and allowed the kids to have dinner while he started teaching them the fundamentals of Poké Copyright Mon. The six were put to bed after this went on until what they assumed to be nighttime. The following day followed a similar routine: fight for a while, then eat while the psychic gave them a lecture. Naruto snickered and added, "Oh, come on, Sakura. We're just playing around." Mudkip was gently pulling at a few of his sun-kissed hairs that he had managed to catch in his lips. He waved her off with a simple, "Idiot, we're not here to play. We're supposed to be training." Sakura's eyes pierced him even more as he said, yeah, but it's not like learning to use that power of dominance thing is that hard." Her comment took Naruto by surprise, and he struggled to think of a response. If it's so easy, why haven't you been able to use it yet? Chikorita tittered at his expense as Sakura grinned. He accused Sasuke with a finger point. Sakura threw her hair over her shoulder and said, "What about him? Sasuke hasn't been able to do it either." The blonde yelled at his teammate, "Sasuke probably hasn't tried yet. I'm sure he could do it the very first time if he wanted to." "All right, you want me to do it, I'll do it." He leapt from the floor and returned to his bed in his previous position. Simultaneously, Naruto grabbed Mudkip, placed his Poké Copyright Mon in front of him, and then grunted briefly before putting all of his energy into establishing a connection with his new partner. With his head tilted to the side, the Mudfish Poké Copyright Mon gazed back at the trainer seated opposite from him with a perplexed look. Neither of them moved, and the two stayed in that identical position. Sakura kept a close eye on them, anticipating their next move. Sasuke even sat up to listen. The tension in the air increased as more than a minute went by. Like the quiet before a storm, the whole room became still. It was 2 minutes later. Sakura carefully rose from her bed and pushed Chikorita from her lap. She moved in 3 deliberate, cautious steps toward Naruto. The Pinkette stood next to her partner and took a moment before slamming her fist into his head. The punch caused Naruto's torso to snap forward, but he immediately sat back up and took a massive breath. As soon as the oxygen flooded back into his system, his navy blue face instantly restored to its natural color. Mudkip glanced between the two teammates, still attempting to make sense of what was happening. "You idiot! You shouldn't stop breathing!" yelled Sakura angrily. Naruto kept trying to catch his breath, but he was unable to reply. After muttering something that the others couldn't understand, Sasuke returned to his bed. When the young Kunoichi heard Naruto's disappointment and self-doubt, she was about to laugh and pump her fist in triumph, but she stopped herself. "Darn it! Sakura, how were you able to do it so easily?" She never imagined that she would hear that. Naruto had never once given up on an assignment since she first met the boy. Even when his chances of success were slim, he constantly threw himself into whatever he was doing. He only ever whined occasionally, and even then, it was short-lived. Sakura sighed slightly and frowned as she peered up at the ceiling. The Pinkette glanced back at the blonde, pausing for a moment to gather her thoughts. "It's not something you can force, Naruto. You just have to feel it." "Huh?" Sakura raked a hand through her hair as she searched for a more appropriate way to express herself. Before long, she stomped a foot in frustration and tightened her fists. With Mudkip by his side, Naruto nodded and turned to face her. "HRRRGH, just try and do what I tell you." He complained a little at the words, "Close your eyes and relax. Don't think about anything." It had never been Naruto's habit to remain motionless for very long. During his toddler years, he was always moving. It was nearly agonizing that he now had to sit still and do nothing. The blonde inhaled deeply a few times and tried to focus again. But this time, he followed Sakura's advice and made an effort to declutter his mind. As Naruto's head cleared, the female member of Team 7 noticed the muscles in his face gradually relax. After a few seconds of waiting, she continued the lesson. Sakura didn't realize Naruto had stopped listening when he said, "Good. Now you should be able to feel a tugging sensation in the back of your head. Focus on that and let it guide you." Deep within his own thoughts, where perils awaited him even while he meditated, Naruto's consciousness had been carried away. As Naruto woke up, the sound of gently trickling pipes reverberated all around him. After supporting himself on his hands and knees, he shook his head to shake off any last traces of sleepiness. Upon doing so, Naruto's first realization was that he was in the center of a small, gurgling brook. The water was just deep enough to cover the tops of his little Hansa about half an inch. There was something odd about the liquid. It appeared to adhere to his skin, circling the flesh for a little time before moving on. Putting that strangeness aside, Naruto got to his feet and looked about. The ceiling of the enormous tunnel he was standing in was roughly 5 feet above the ground. The curved walls were hidden by cracked and rusted pipes. Before their inevitable fall, tiny water beads gathered together gently on the metal underbellies. A dark crimson light swept across the whole area, coming from one end of the sewer far away. It was in that direction that Naruto felt an unexplained call. He approached red light as his feet started to walk as though they had their own will. Little by little, he approached the source. He could almost make out a tunnel entrance through the gory cloud. Just a few feet from the mouth, he abruptly came to a halt. A tiny white glimmer started to shimmer softly behind him. Naruto only saw it briefly before the darker rays surrounding it ate up the speck. The blonde turned, curious, and walked back to where he had woken up. The pale glow intensified as he moved. The sharp crimson of the other was beaten back by the growth of what had been a speck with each step. Naruto started to notice the changes as soon as he was only a few yards from the source of the new glow. The first light was angry and malevolent. It suffocated everything it came into contact with as it hung in midair. But the white sheen was firm and neutral. The weight of ages weighed on its rays. It was evident to him that this was something that had existed long before he did and would continue to exist well beyond his wildest expectations. Even so, there was a peculiar familiarity about the light, as if it were a word he was thinking of but could not recall. Gently he put his hands on either side and walked the remaining space between himself and the white orb. The moment his hands connected, the light sprang forth, illuminating every square inch of the wet sewer. Although Naruto's eyes widened in horror, he was unable to stop it. His arms remained firmly attached to the gleaming orb, defying his orders. Naruto soon saw nothing but white. The light kept spreading, getting bigger and bigger, engulfing him in its splendor. When Naruto's thoughts returned from his introspective voyage, his eyes sprung open. His entire body felt electrified. The deep strength swelling from within him was almost palpable. He turned his gaze to Mudkip, who was grinning back at him. Naruto truly senses his partner's happiness. The Poke Copyright Mon had at last met a companion with whom he could bond. Once more, he had a true mate after 1,000 years of longing. Naruto suppressed his tears due to the feelings he was experiencing. He didn't care if they belonged to him or his Poke Copyright Mon. Happiness overcame him as well. He had made a quiet vow to follow through on his friendship with a friend he knew would always be there for him. After bending over, Naruto gave Mudkip a hearty embrace. Sakura grinned. She knew Naruto had done it the moment he opened his eyes. Sakura bent to take Chikorita up after she nuzzled her neck on the Pinkette's legs. Sakura sensed the grass. Type's joy for her fellow Poke Copyright Mon and his master through their relationship. After flipping the light switch next to her bed, the young Kunoichi nestled Chikorita and herself into their beds. She chose to let Naruto and Mudkip enjoy themselves even though she heard them begin to playfully wrestle again near her. Sasuke lay in his bed on the opposite side of the room, peacefully. From the start, he had been observing the lesson. Although Sasuke would never publicly acknowledge it, Sakura's instruction has benefited more than just Naruto. The boy had a weird sensation. He had cut himself off from the outside world a long time ago, but suddenly he found himself in a closer relationship with a species he had just recently discovered existed. In his 12 years of life, he had never felt more connected to his Poke Copyright Mon than he did to him. Sasuke could sense Charmander studying him in the background, just as he was. At the conclusion of their evaluations, there was a glimmer of mutual acceptance between the two. After that, Charmander ascended the blankets from the ground and huddled close to Sasuke's foot. After rolling his eyes and sighing at his Poke Copyright Mon's arrogance, the Uchiha fell asleep with the fire type. With their partners by their sides, the genin of Team 7 stood proudly beside one another the next afternoon. Mewtwo stood on the other side of the group, watching them closely. The arena's dazzling lights were shining over them. The genin were waiting for their new teacher to speak, and the dome was quiet at the moment. "I am proud to call you my students," said Sakura and Naruto with broad smiles, while Sasuke grinned slightly. "You three have done exceptionally well these past 2 days. Your control over the power of dominance and the bond between you and your Poke Copyright Mon have both grown at astounding rates. But now it is time for you to leave this place." The sudden change caught the genin off guard and left them reeling. What? Why? We don't want to. Naruto stumbled as he spoke for the others. It is necessary. The longer you remain here, the more likely it is someone will find this place while they search for you. Sasuke looked at the medium with a scowl. What do you mean, search for us? Including the time you three spent unconscious after awakening the power of dominance, you have been in this facility for 3.5 days. You must have realized someone would have noticed your absences by now. The gang was completely intimidated. As a matter of fact, none of them had considered such a possibility. They hadn't given much thought to anything else because they were so engrossed in the excitement of discovery. This insight caused conflicting emotions. Sasuke chastised himself in his mind for not seeing this fact earlier. Any clan member's disappearance was always given top importance, even if he had no close friends or family. If that individual was the last member still alive, it would be even more terrible. Most of the time, Naruto just shrugged his shoulders. He didn't think it would go much beyond the fact that Teuchi and Ayame could be a little worried about his absence from ramen in a while. Haruka presumably believed he was simply preoccupied with missions, and the old man was probably too preoccupied with Hokage-related tasks to notice his absence. Sakura felt a great deal of guilt. She had assured her parents that she would meet with her sensei and return in time for dinner. Since they don't know what terrible things could have happened to their only daughter to cause her to disappear for more than 3 days, they must be quite concerned about her. She had no idea how she would feel if things were the other way around. Sensing that his comrades were in heaving mode, Naruto attempted to cheer them all up. He scratched his right cheek and replied, "Hey, I guess we're the ones late for our team meeting now, right guys?" Sasuke shook his head at the pathetic effort at a joke and mumbled the word, "idiot," beneath his breath. "So, if you don't want other people to find out about this place, how are we going to explain where we were the past 3 days and where our Poke Copyright Mon came from?" The lad with raven hair inquired. Mewtwo summoned 3 Poke Copyright Balls from the Poke Copyright Mon storage area with a raised hand. In front of the kids, the red and white globes came to a halt and hovered just above chest height. "You will not need to explain how you found your Poke Copyright Mon, for they will not be joining you." "What? No way!" screamed Sakura, his voice full of rage. Sasuke and Naruto continued to protest until Mewtwo lost patience. Silence. The children were quieted by the power in his voice, which never altered in volume. The existence of Poke Copyright Mon must remain a secret for as long as possible. Should anyone see your partners, they will surely question what they are, where they came from, and if there are any more like them. Therefore your Poke Copyright Mon must remain here where it is safe. Mewtwo's words penetrated the genin because they understood that he was correct. As long as the 3 disclosed where they obtained their Poke Copyright Mon, the town would, in theory, let them retain them. Sakura felt an inspiration flash over her eyes. What if we kept them in their Poke Copyright Balls? That way, we could still have them with us, but no one would see them. Mewtwo nodded his head. It would still be necessary to keep the Poke Copyright Balls hidden and out of sight at all times. Aside from that, it is far easier to lose or steal a Poke Copyright Ball than a Poke Copyright Mon. Therefore, the safest course of action is for your Poke Copyright Mon to remain here. Sakura was obviously depressed at the counter. She was unable to discover a means to circumvent his reasoning. The sight of Naruto, Sakura, and Sasuke's faces made Mewtwo smile a little. "But don't think this means an end to your training. You will return here the moment you have the chance to slip away unnoticed. There is still much that I must teach you 3. Although they expressed it in different ways, he could see that they were all relieved and happy at the possibility of seeing their spouses again in the future. His happiness for the kids was tinged with resentment since it reminded him of his existence 1,000 years before. His thoughts were brought back to the present by the psychic Poke Copyright Mon. He still hadn't responded to the initial query from his raven-haired pupil. Not far from this facility is a small system of abandoned tunnels. I have seen to it that a plausible amount of food and trash has been moved there and the entrances collapsed. Your henge technique should be adequate to make yourselves look the part. Go straight to your homes and release the jutsu under the guise of cleaning yourselves up. Upon your return to your village, you will tell them that it was there you were exploring when a cave.in trapped you inside. Any investigation your government will conduct of the structure will simply support your claims." Naruto asked, "But I thought you didn't want people coming near here?" Naruto chuckled awkwardly at the reminder that his team was able to, for the most part, walk straight into the supposedly secure facility. "Now that I am awakened, the psychic barriers protecting this place have been greatly strengthened. You 3 shall be the first and last to enter here unwelcome. Of that, I will personally make sure. It is time. You may say goodbye to your partners first before leaving." Chikorita suddenly found herself crammed into her trainer's arms. She fought against the grip until Sakura sensed her anguish via their connection and relaxed her embrace a little. Chikorita then did her best to return the affectionate gesture. For the duration of their farewell, the two stayed that way. Sasuke nodded while gazing down at his Charmander. The fire lizard followed suit, starting to comprehend the peculiar mode of communication that his new mate had chosen. In this regard, the Poké Copyright Mon were superior to others since Charmander was able to sense the thoughts that Sasuke would never express due to their mutual relationship created by the power of dominance. Squatting to Mudkip's level, Naruto did so. Once, twice, then often, he gave the water type a pat on the head. The feeling of Mudkip's annoyance in the back of his skull made him smile. As his Poké Copyright Mon became increasingly irritated, the blonde carried on the action. On Naruto's subsequent effort, Mudkip finally lost patience and bit his fingers. With a painful shriek, Naruto attempted to remove the mud fish from his right hand. Mudkip chomped down harder in return, refusing to let go. It was Mudkip's turn to sneer smugly at being in the opposite position of his tormentor. Ultimately, Mewtwo had to intervene and stop the two from their immature behavior. Following their separation, Naruto protruded his tongue at Mudkip. The Poké Copyright Mon, surprisingly, reacted similarly. They stayed that way until the scenario finally caused both of them to burst out laughing. Mewtwo gave a headshake. The three shinobi bowed their heads in agreement and snatched the floating Poké Copyright balls from the air. That is enough. Return your Poké Copyright Mon as I have should you. They squeezed the balls seemingly in unison, enveloping each of their Poké Copyright Mon in a translucent red light that blasted out from the front. Then, with an odd whooshing sound, the creatures vanished within the balls. After completing the act, Mewtwo ordered the Poké Copyright balls to return to their original location. I shall be awaiting your arrival. Following that rejection, the genin donned a henge to change their appearance. They were all now covered in mud and grime, and their clothing had been slightly torn for effect. After saying goodbye to their sensei, Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura made their way to the elevator that had initially brought them here. The flashing button was pressed after a final long look, and the three rose back to the surface. As usual, Kakashi had taken his sweet time walking to the academy on the day of team assignments. Shortly after he entered the building, the 3 o'clock bell that often marked the conclusion of the school day rang. About 2.5 hours after the scheduled meeting time, he finally opened the sliding door to discover the classroom deserted. He was first a little impressed that the kids had the audacity to abandon him. Maybe this year would be fun. The Hitaki left to visit each student's home, reasoning that he should still find them and inform them of their test the following day. When he first knocked on Naruto's residence, he got no answer. Kakashi decided to go in nevertheless, and he moved up the side of the building and around back to one of the cracked open windows of the apartment. When he walked in, the place was in roughly the same state as he had anticipated. The sink was filled with soiled dishes, glasses, and other kitchenware that needed to be cleaned by their owner. The floor was littered with a few haphazard pieces of clothing. Based on its empty contents, the garbage can had just been removed. Kakashi looked around but couldn't find Naruto's hide or tail, so he just got a piece of paper and jotted down the information the child required. Before leaving the way he had come, he placed it on the table and placed it in an envelope. After that, the Junin traveled to the Uchiha district, which was the epitome of a ghost town. As though under tremendous strain from the weight of their memories, dilapidated and abandoned buildings drooped downward. The faint red streaks of human blood still splattered on the walls of the structures would be visible if one were to examine them closely enough. Glass from broken windows littered the dirt roads, and once beautiful home gardens had become overrun with vines and weeds. In their haste to hide from the silver-haired man, rats and other small rodents darted haphazardly across the empty streets. He kept walking till he saw one house that appeared to be in a reasonably good condition. The flower bed that surrounded the house's exterior and the lawn were both in rather decent shape. Even though the house was kept up nicely, Kakashi still had to scowl at what he saw. What to do with Sasuke following the massacre has been hotly debated. It was customary to place an orphan in the care of their legal guardians or, in the absence of that, their nearest living relative. The youth would be taken to one of Konoha's orphanages if the aforementioned individuals were judged unfit to care for him or her. But none of those choices worked in this situation. No orphanage was prepared to handle the type of mental trauma the youngster had experienced, and all the other members of Sasuke's family had been murdered. Everything that the Uchiha clan had ever possessed was now up for sale, which made things even more complicated. Sasuke could not legitimately inherit his family's belongings and assets because he was still regarded by the law as a kid. The local authority was left in charge of everything, even if the great bulk of the objects were useless. The hundreds of jutsu scrolls and other secrets the Uchiha had been hiding to themselves for centuries were obviously not included in that. By definition, the Uchiha library was enormous, as was the Kekkei Genkei of the clan. If these methods ended up in the wrong hands, many of them would be very harmful. No clan had ever anticipated anything as extreme as the massacre, but all had backup plans in case something were to jeopardize the integrity of their clan techniques. Ultimately, it was agreed that the youngster would be freed so that Sasuke could assume responsibility for everything. The young man would be supported by his relatives' assets until he was able to support himself, and 2 Chunin were assigned to keep watch over him from the shadows in case something untoward happened. The ideas caused Kakashi to sigh. In such a scenario, there were no really correct responses. All one could do was make a decision and hope for the best. That being said, the Junin went on. Once more, his knock at the house's front door went unanswered. However, he was somewhat ready for that to occur this time and crept in through an unlocked window once more. If the boy wanted to spend as little time as possible in the empty district, he could understand. Kakashi discovered a very tidy and well-organized house inside. It seemed that Sasuke was much better at keeping the interior neat and orderly than he was at maintaining the exterior. Even the boy's bed was nicely made, and nothing in the whole house was out of place. He hurriedly composed another message and handed it to a Chunin outside. The 2 guards lovingly protected the scarred youngster whenever they could, even though their task had long since been declared accomplished. The door was eventually answered at the final residence Kakashi visited. Like most civilian residences, Sakura's was close to Konoha's center. In the event that the walls were breached by an invading force, this arrangement helped protect non-combatants. Additionally, it facilitated the evacuation of civilians into the Hokage Mountains' protective cloisters. The house itself had almost no yard and was a pretty modest split level. The outside was a cozy shade of beige, with a deeper brown border around the 2 upper windows. A woman, around in her mid-30s, answered his mild raps. She accessorized her cream-colored complexion with a white apron and a sky-blue sundress. She had the same vivid pink hair as her daughter, but it was shorter and fell just beyond her shoulders. Her bubblegum hair was pulled back in a high ponytail behind her head. Her hazel eyes were deep and dark. Kakashi could smell the unmistakable aroma of cooked pastries as the air from the home gently drifted out. The Junin was asked by Sakura's mother, "Hello, can I help you?" Since the 2 had never met before, her bewildered tone made sense. The woman shook her head and said, "Yes, my name is Kakashi Hitaki, and I am your daughter's new sensei. Is she here?" A worried tone was beginning to creep into the woman's voice as she said, "No, she left early this morning to go to team assignments, and I haven't seen her since." "Why? Is something wrong?" "She told us she would be back between 1 and 2, but we haven't heard from her at all." That was precisely the response Kakashi was hoping to avoid. He could explain away Sasuke's and Naruto's absences by saying that he was just not there at the appropriate moment, but Sakura's file had mentioned that she was a very polite girl who was close to her family. If she were heading somewhere else, she probably would have stopped by to at least let her folks know. His mind started to raise red flags because she hadn't, and her mother was becoming increasingly anxious about it. The elder Pinkhead stepped aside and ushered the Junin in. "Mrs. Haruno, would it be okay if I waited here for her? Certain events caused me to be late for the team meeting today, and information your daughter needs to know concerning the next few days." Nodding his head politely, Kakashi said, "Yes, of course. Do come in." He swiftly made 3 shadow clones before going inside. While the last clone searched the village for his missing squad, 2 were instructed to go and wait at Naruto's and Sasuke's homes in case either of them showed up. Despite being shocked by what he had done, the woman remained silent. Mrs. Haruno escorted him into the home to a tiny eating area when he entered through the entryway and slipped his sandals off on the mat. The kitchen and dining room were partially separated by a waist-high counter on the right. A variety of baked products that had been left to cool were spread out on the counter. As Sakura's mother went back to cooking, the silver-haired Junin took up residence in a corner of the dining room. Kakashi knew she was becoming more nervous by the moment, even though she had no years of expertise reading people. The sun soon started to set, releasing its last golden rays. In order to complete sewing a dress for her daughter as a graduation gift, Mrs. Haruno had taken a break from baking. In the corner he had claimed earlier in the day, Kakashi remained still. At that moment, the house's front door creaked open, and they both turned to face it. A man who was little over 6 feet tall entered. He was dressed in a fern green underobe and a dark, light blue kimono shirt that hung loosely about his torso. He wore plain brown shorts that ended just above his knees. The man's head was covered in short brunette hair. When he saw Kakashi, the man froze, but he soon got over it. When he passed by, he kissed his wife on the cheek. and she gave him a half-hearted kiss in return. Kakashi returned his focus to the Junin and responded to the question that was about to be posed. "Mr. Haruno, I presume?" he said with a nod of approval. "I am your daughter's Junin sensei. Have you had any contact with her after she left for team assignments earlier today?" Mr. Haruno's voice was shockingly deep as he responded, "No, I haven't. I thought she'd be back by now." "She isn't. Mr. Hitaki has been searching for her and her teammates since he found them gone from the academy," explained Mrs. Haruno. At such news, her husband's expression hardened. Grabbing a chair, he took his wife's hands in his and sat down next to her. He took advantage of the fact that his hands were much larger than hers by using his thumbs to caress the back of his beloved's palms. Hours went by. The village was now enveloped in darkness, and Haruno was nowhere to be seen. The three were still waiting even though the great bulk of Konoha had fallen asleep in their beds by this point. They had not discovered any concrete proof of the children's whereabouts because none of the shadow clones Kakashi had made had yet to dissipate. At last, Kakashi had to acknowledge that he was at his breaking point and called off the jutsu. His mind flooded with memories of the three doppelganger unknown currency ingers. After they reportedly attempted to booby-trap one of the Western Guard's towers with itching powder, the clone who was out investigating the hamlet had encountered a group of Chunin who were also searching for his three genin. Kakashi became as uneasy as his clone had been a few hours before. The three would have undoubtedly returned to their homes by now if that was what they had been doing after leaving the academy. Unfortunately for Naruto and Sasuke, it seemed unlikely that Sakura would have gone to a friend's residence until things calmed down. There was only one thing left to do in light of all these circumstances. Kakashi attempted to say, "Mr. and Mrs. Haruno," as softly as he could, but it was ineffective because the two continued to startle at the sound. Mrs. Haruno was fighting to keep her cool, and Mr. Haruno was as stony-faced as ever. "I must ask that you to come with me to the Hokage Tower. We need to report that your daughter and her teammates have gone missing." That was the last straw. The terrified mother sobbed, leaving the tablecloth smeared with her tears. She kept sobbing onto her husband's shoulder as he drew her closer. Kakashi seemed uneasy and continued to stand there. He had never been adept at comforting people, but fortunately Mr. Haruno was here to help. Mrs. Haruno sobbed for more than 10 minutes before her husband helped her stand up. He led her out of the home behind Kakashi, shutting the door behind them as she clutched to his side. Kakashi led the two toward the Hokage Tower through the dark streets. They moved slowly yet steadily. Luckily, following a simple security check, the group was able to proceed directly to the Hokage's office because Kakashi was not only a highly regarded Junin but also a close friend of the Hokage. The Hitaki were aware that the process involved more than that, of course, but there was no need to alert the Harunos to the four Anbu closely watching them from the shadows. Kakashi was not surprised that the elderly boss was still here, working through the night. Hiruzen always made sure to have at least an hour free each night, even though he could have easily finished everything that was required of him by this time. This was because the elderly guy would use that time to visit all of Konoha's hospitals and speak with the injured and ill patients. It was one of the many reasons why the people of the Leaf liked the Third so much. After being briefed on the issue right away, the elderly man was already looking carefully into his crystal ball as the three of them entered the Hokage's office. Kakashi placed a hand on Mrs. Haruno's shoulder and shook his head as she opened her mouth to speak to her leader. Minutes went by. Sarutobi's scowl became more and more noticeable. He looked up from his work with a sorrowful expression in his eyes after what felt like an age. "Kakashi, go to the Inuzuka compound. I have sent a message for all off-duty clansmen to join you in a search effort. Any available Hyuga will also be joining you as soon as they can. I want these children found immediately." He spoke with a firm voice. After giving one knowing nod, the Junin vanished into a smoke cloud. Then the Hokage looked at the two citizens who were still standing in front of him. "Mr. and Mrs. Haruno, do not worry. We will find your daughter and her teammates, but right now I need your help. Kakashi sent a message ahead of you, informing us of what he had learned, but we need more information. I need you to tell me everything you can about what your daughter said, where she might have gone, and anyone else who may know something." The search then started. The Leaf's shinobi were in a stifled clamor for 3 days. Every inch of the settlement and its environs was searched by search parties. The intelligence unit was working diligently to stop the word from spreading to other nations in addition to searching for any and all clues. The entire Land of Fire was under increased security. Though the third Hokage was certain that it was not for the same reasons, even the ninja Sarutobi had assigned to watch Danzo reported that Root was looking into the situation on its own. Kakashi was exhausted from lack of food and sleep on the third day. He was on the verge of depleting his chakra reserves. The military pills he had taken the day before were the only thing keeping him going, but he could already feel his hope and the momentary boost ebbing. Kakashi believed that he was destined to fail no matter what he did. After the man committed suicide, he rejected him, failing his father. He had to see Obito's death at Kanabi Bridge after failing him. He felt compelled to kill Rin after failing to keep his word to protect her. That fateful night that the Kyuubi attacked, he was unable to assist Minato Sensei. These ideas tormented Kakashi as he tried everything he could to locate the missing kids, but the likelihood of success decreased with every day that went by. The likelihood that he would need to expand his list of people increased. On the fourth day of the hunt, just after noon, Kakashi finally got the news he had been waiting for. A messenger hawk screamed from high above as he was making another round beyond the village's perimeter. The Junin halted his sprint and extended his left arm. The bird landed silently and waited for Kakashi to remove the message. He struggled to suppress his emotions as he read the news, and the Hitaki silently thanked whichever god had chosen to provide him another chance. Gazing at his newest genin squad, Kakashi let out a mental sigh. The woodland was covered in long, dark shadows as the late afternoon sun was halfway down to the tree line. 3 days after the three resurfaced, the four were assembled in the middle of Training Ground 7. This was the first time he was seeing them face-to-face, yet no other genin team had ever stressed the gray-haired Junin as much as these three had. Kakashi had immediately gone to the hospital where the note stated his students had been sent after learning that they had been located. He introduced himself and asked how they were all doing. Although the talks were short, he was able to ensure that they would be alright. To learn the specifics of what had transpired, he proceeded directly to the Hokage's tower. The three had been trapped below by a cave.in in a cave they discovered in the forest while trying to hide from their pursuers. But the cave they had discovered was not just any old one. No, it seems that his pupils had discovered one of Orochimaru's old, secret labs. That truth had caused Kakashi to shake his head. They were still cleaning up the remains of his cruel experiments 15 years after he left the leaf. Luckily or regrettably, depending on your point of view, Orochimaru had decided that the items in this lab were significant enough to be taken out or destroyed prior to his escape. Because of this piece of information, Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura were kept in the hospital for an even longer period of time while the doctors made sure that everything was okay with their bodies. Unwanted surprises were always a part of the Snake Sanin's repertoire. Kakashi compelled himself to interrupt that thinking and return his attention to the current issue. The intelligence department and Enbu were tasked with investigating what remained in the cavern. It was his responsibility to put these three to the test and determine whether they were prepared for shinobi life. He held the two chimes up for them to examine before hanging them back on his right side. Since we've already been introduced, let's jump right into it, shall we? You three will have until noon to steal these bells from me. Anyone who does not get a bell will tied to one of those stumps and be forced to watch as the rest of us eat lunch. They will then be sent back for another year at the academy. Since there are only 2 bells, at least one of you will not be passing. Do you understand? The genin nodded. Alright then, one final thing. Come at me with everything you have, or you will never be able to get a bell. Begin. As soon as he signaled, Sakura, Sasuke, and Naruto took off. Oddly enough, though, Kakashi's keen senses informed him that they were leaving together rather than dispersing like a normal genin squad would. Fascinating. With his favorite copy of Icha Icha in hand, the silver-haired Junin started his casual pursuit. After all, they were the ones who would eventually have to pursue him, so why should he put himself through any stress? Soon after, Kakashi came to a tiny clearing in the middle of the dense forest. When 5 Sasuke and Sakura characters and a horde of Naruto characters jumped out of the tree line, the man's focus was diverted from his reading by the gentle sound of stirring leaves. He immediately pointed out that Naruto's clones were all too real and prepared to prove it, while the first 2 groups of doppelganger unknown currency ingers were flowing through the air far too fluidly to be real. To begin the tiresome task of eliminating each chakra construct one at a time, the Hitaki ducked to the left. Every time one would advance to attack, he could easily dodge the awkward blow and use his book to slap the clone in the skull, destroying it. One of the clones approached him with his arm outstretched for a haymaker, but Kakashi dispersed it and turned his back, only to be thrown to the ground. It seems that the actual Naruto had also been involved in the conflict. Unfortunately for the youngster, before the blonde captured him, Kakashi had already swapped himself out for one of Naruto's own clones. Looking down on the skirmish from a neighboring limb, the Junin reappeared. Sakura and Sasuke were waiting for the right time to attack beneath him. In his disinterested drawl, Kakashi remarked, "You know, it's not nice to make your teammate do all the work." His voice caused the 2 genin to go pale, and Sasuke swiftly spun around and hurled a bunch of shuriken at the instructor. In order to avoid the deadly stars, Kakashi gently reduced the flow of chakra to his feet and fell backwards. To the surprise of the boy and girl, Their teacher was now hanging upside down from the bottom of the tree branch with ease. Naruto's arrival on the scene was indicated by a loud smashing sound coming from the foliage. "You're not getting away this time, sensei." Shadow clone jutsu. Suddenly, a sea of blondes in orange swaths surrounded the tree's base. Kakashi had to raise an impressed eyebrow at the accomplishment, but he was defending against a massive en masse attack in the next instant, so he had little time to think about it. The clones rushed the tree together, rushing to reach him. Instead of simply fleeing to another neighboring canopy, Kakashi chose to make fun of the young genin and refused to back down. The waves of assailants were beaten back by the Junin as he assumed one of his favorite taijutsu postures. As Kakashi hung on the underside of his limb, the clones were dispersed one after another, and each punch and kick was parried with only a little effort. Frustrated, one of the Narutos produced a pair of kunai. He swung the blades in wide, sweeping motions as he lunged at Kakashi. The Junin was able to easily avoid the blows due to their carelessness, and his teacher retaliated when Naruto's slash left his guard down. Naruto was forced to drop the blades after Kakashi took hold of his wrists and slightly twisted them. Then he lightly kicked the boy's solar plexus. It sent Naruto reeling out in all directions until he stopped beside a nearby tree. He took the boy's own kunai out of the air and sent them sailing after him, but the Junin was not done yet. The blonde had just gotten to his feet when he was struck by the kunai. They fastened his arms to the tree stump and sliced through the sleeves of his orange jumpsuit. Although Naruto would not be able to use the blades for very long, Kakashi had to be pleased with his creation because it would keep him out of commission long enough for him to deal with the remaining clones the youngster had created. At that moment, the man noticed two darker individuals navigating among the orange crowd. When Kakashi had to quickly turn his head away from the razor sharp kunai that had emerged from the smoke, he had snatched one Cage Bunshin by the collar and scattered it. Before his focus was drawn back toward home, he managed to catch a glimpse of pink and scarlet in the direction the kunai had come from. Sasuke arrived at the base of the tree and swiftly ascended to the Junin's level by using the many Naruto clones as jumping points, while Kakashi had been evading ninja tools. While his attention was elsewhere, the Uchiha aimed to nail his sensei square in the back with a roundhouse kick, but the Junin managed to spin his torso around enough to deflect the shin with his left forearm. In order to swing his body around the Junin's back and approach the now unprotected bells, Sasuke then caught the top of his foot on the bent elbow. When Kakashi noticed this, he fired a foot out at the genin from behind. Although Sasuke's attempt was thwarted by having to twist his body out of the way, the Uchiha continued to work on his backup plan. He snapped the other arm forward, freeing the shuriken that was trapped in its hold, and pulled back the arm he had stretched out toward the bell. The thread that tied the bells to the Junin was readily severed by the spinning blade's ability to cut through the air. The first to respond was Kakashi, who cut off his chakra link to the tree limb right away. Sasuke would not be able to land in time to try for the liberated bells again because he was still recovering from his aerial maneuver. Sakura's support position near the edge of the Cage Bunshin mass meant that she would have to battle her way through the crowd to even approach the chimes, and the actual Naruto had only just been able to break free from Kakashi's hold on him. As a result, Sakura was a null factor. As he fell, the Junin absorbed all of this. Below him, all the shadow clones in the region were scurrying in the direction of the falling chimes, hoping to get to them before their fleeting lives were over. Before Kakashi put his boots on the clone's back, one bravely leapt forward to seize the bells and even succeeded in doing so. But this time, the teacher was the one who was duped. Just before he landed, Kakashi's skilled eye noticed the clone's shape wobble a little, but it was too late to change his course. The real Naruto used the clone and took the attack himself, rather than falling on a shadow clone and scattering it. Now where the genuine one had been, the Bunshin with the bells took off as quickly and as far away as he could. Naruto let out a painful grunt beneath the Junin. Kakashi quickly detached himself from his pupil, letting two clones pull the blonde away. As the remaining shadow clones launched a last ditch attack to stop Kakashi from chasing them, Sasuke and Sakura noticed this and followed suit. They vanished one by one, and whether intentional or a happy accident, the smoke from their dispelling only served to hide the genin's departure even more. When all the clones were gone, Kakashi paused to think. A squad had successfully gotten the bells from him for the first time since he began competing in teams, and based on his observations during the test, they had also passed the second section. Now that the test was over, the only thing left to do was watch what they did. Naruto had already demonstrated that he was prepared to suffer a setback in order to complete the mission, but would he be prepared to jeopardize his own career in order to protect his teammates? Would they treat him the same way? There was only one way to know. Kakashi quickly located his pupils close to the training ground's western boundary. Sasuke and Naruto were both trying to conceal their fatigue, but the three of them were sitting on the ground, panting. The group's blonde still had the bells gripped in his fist. The Junin settled down on a large limb and watched to see what would happen. He was spared a long wait. Naruto attempted to provoke the Uchiha by saying, "Hey, what's the matter, Sasuke? That little run tire you out?" The mocking question was simply dismissed by Sasuke, but Kakashi saw that he made an even greater effort to control his emotions. Although Sakura had to concede that they all appeared more worn, she yelled, "Shut up, Naruto. Sasuke is probably just acting so that we don't feel bad for slowing him down. He probably could have gotten those bells all by himself." It was odd. She was more exhausted now than she had been for virtually all of her memory. Sasuke and Naruto didn't appear any better. Any more teasing was stopped by her reprimand, and the woodland fell silent save for the gentle sound of the wind rustling the branches. "So, what do we do now?" was Naruto's final question. Sasuke merely groaned, while Sakura, in a nervous habit, bit the tip of her thumb. After a few minutes, the Uchiha eventually spoke in a firm tone, "I'm not going back to the academy." Naruto turned his head and gave the other boy a fierce look. "I'm not either, I barely made it out this time." Without looking directly at Naruto, Sasuke spoke the words, "Then you need more schooling, idiot." The blonde snarled, but before he could reply, Sakura interrupted. Sasuke, Naruto, there's something else we have to think about." "What's that, Sakura?" asked Naruto. The two just stared at her, not understanding what she was trying to say. "Well, whoever gets a bell will become a full-fledged shinobi, so they will probably be busy doing missions a lot of time. That means whoever doesn't have more free time, whoever goes back to the academy can go visit Mewtwo Sensei sooner and more often." When she stated it, both guys' eyes expanded tremendously. Despite one of them denying it, the three had missed their newfound friends ever since they had emerged from the secret vault. The worst thing was that their relationship did not even allow them to sense them. It didn't help that Mewtwo had told them that this kind of thing would occur and that it was normal for partners to be separated. It was a little annoying, as if one of their limbs had suddenly become numb. They were aware of its presence, but they were unable to sense it. The genin had been silently considering Sakura's announcement for even longer. The three of them were debating whether rejoining their buddies or pursuing a career as shinobi was more essential. Even though none of them wanted to admit it, they all came to the same conclusion in the end. The silence was finally broken by Naruto. "I think Sakura should get to go back. I mean, you were the top-ranking kunoichi at the academy, so you'll get to spend more time with Mewtwo Sensei than I would." His generous remarks stunned Sakura. Sakura was on the verge of accepting Naruto's kind offer when he said, "Besides, you're a lot better at using this power thing than either of us. You would get more out of it than us." Although it would be unfair to Naruto and Sasuke, she was determined to see Chikorita once more. She was able to compliment her crush, which was a benefit. "No way, Sasuke should go back. He's way more talented than I am. My parents are watching me like hawks anyway. I will probably be able to slip away easier if I take a bell." Naruto and Sakura exchanged their thoughts, then turned to Sasuke for his. He folded his pale hands in front of his face and thought about what had just been stated. Unavoidably, he thought about his brother again. He could picture every second of that night, and he knew what he needed to do. The blonde's mouth nearly fell open when she said, "Naruto, return to the academy." He never imagined that the Uchiha would say something like that. "Face it, loser, you need all the help you can get." Naruto reflected that the sentiment had been pleasant for the time being. Kakashi listened to the entire debate from his leafy vantage point, and two things struck him right away. The first was that this Mewtwo Sensei seemed to have an unusual bond with the three. Although he was not very familiar with the academy staff these days, the Junin had never heard of anyone with that name. However, he did mentally note that he would follow up on it later. Their tones were the second thing that caught his attention. They all seemed to be eager to return to the academy. He had no choice but to shake his head and tell them the truth. Strange as it was, they had finally passed the last exam. The man in the mask lowered himself to the ground and gestured to his pupils. When he appeared, the genin scurried to their feet and prepared themselves as best they could, saying, "Yo." Kakashi saw how tattered they all appeared. The Hitaki believed that he had his job cut out for him because of his dysfunctional personality, desire to fail and return for more education, and apparent lack of energy. Kakashi stood up and said, "I could take those bells back from you, since the timer hasn't gone off yet. But that would take away from my reading time. I guess I'll just pass you all instead." When he saw his trainees stumble, Kakashi laughed aloud. He was undoubtedly skilled at pulling a quick one. But all the laughter soon died in his throat. He was celebrating himself in his head when Sakura, Sasuke, and Naruto fell to the ground. The children's eyes rolled back in their skulls as their bodies started to jerk in brief, violent spasms. The legs flailed frantically. Their stomachs fought to push out every last drop of liquid, and they choked up clear, runny vomit from their mouths. Any remaining color was gone from their faces, and the air was filled with the acidic stink of bile. Kakashi was on the move in an instant. By the time the dog's master had produced 5 shadow clones, his quickest ninkin, Ahe, was already racing as fast as he could to the closest hospital. The 6 Junin utilized their significantly superior power to restrain the young one's arms and legs as gently as they could. In order to free up their hands to support the trembling heads of the children to the side, the clones closest to the children utilized their knees for this purpose. As Kakashi slammed Naruto's ankles firmly on the ground, fear tightened his hand around the very center of his heart. These kids had suffered because of his own shortcomings a week before. It was different this time. He had been powerless a week before. He was here this time. They couldn't be lost again. Get up. As his thoughts gradually came back to reality, Naruto stirred. The first thing he saw was the cozy bed with warm, cozy linens on which he slept. He nearly sighed in satisfaction, but his brain chose to notice the dull throbbing inside his head at that precise time. With reluctance, the blonde reached under the bed linens to rub his temples. Naruto started to piece together what had caused him to be in this state as the pain subsided. Kakashi. Sensei telling his team that they had passed his test and were now full-fledged genin was the last thing the boy remembered. Naruto had just begun to rejoice when a wave of fatigue and then excruciating pain went through his body. He shuddered at the thought of the intensity of it alone. However, he was fortunate to have blacked out soon after it began. Naruto felt a smug smile appear on his face as he returned his attention to the test itself. Even though they could only train with Mewtwo Sensei for a few days, the difference was evident. Stealing a bell from Kakashi Sensei was far easier than attempting to deal a serious blow to the psychic Poké copyright Mon. Mewtwo Sensei would spar with the new trainers for hours on end and never get any scratches. Any more thought on Naruto's part was cut short when a rather heavy object landed directly on his chest. When the blonde's eyes opened, he sat up straight in bed. Whatever it was fell to the bottom of his bed after tumbling down his torso. As his eyes adjusted to the low light levels, he blinked quickly. When Naruto could see well again, he peered down to see Mudkip scrambling back onto his 4 stubby legs. When Uzumaki saw his partner Poké copyright Mon, he was ecstatic. His first instinct was to embrace the mudfish, but the water type had other ideas. Mudkip rammed his forehead into the genin's nose when Naruto extended his arms, apparently not liking being flung from his trainer's chest in that way. When he heard his buddy muttering whispered curses, Mudkip smiled. Naruto was about to strike back when he had a startling realization. As he desperately attempted to hide the Poké copyright Mon with his bed linens, the blonde exclaimed, "Wait a second. What the hell are you doing here, Mudkip? You're not supposed to be seen." Meanwhile, taking pleasure in Naruto's growing annoyance, Mudkip joyfully defied his master's attempts. "He is here because my hypothesis was correct." Naruto stopped his futile attempts to conceal his Poké copyright Mon after realizing the voice in his thoughts. He whirled his head, searching for the source. He eventually realized he was in a little hospital room with 4 beds while doing this. Sakura was beside him, propped against her own headboard, Chikorita peacefully perched on her lap. The one diagonally opposite from the Uzumaki was inhabited by Sasuke, who could see an orange tail protruding over the front. Finally, Mewtwo was floating calmly in the air beside an open window on Naruto's left side of the room, his face partially lit by the full moon outside and the light from Charmander's flame. Sasuke leaned forward and cupped his palms in front of his face, asking, "What hypothesis?" Mewtwo took a minute to close his eyes before responding. "The 3 of you used the power of dominance to protect yourselves from my psychic attack 7 days ago." The brutal reality of Mewtwo's statements left all 3 children in disbelief. "That same power is now causing your bodies to deteriorate," Sakura said, panic beginning to seep into her voice. "But you said people used this power long ago. Did this happen to them too?" Mewtwo gave a headshake. "No, as the connection between our 2 species deepened, the human body grew more acclimated to the pressure the power of dominance put on it. The power was no longer available to your kind after Poké copyright Mon vanished. In the centuries since, it has now fallen into utter dormancy." Sasuke's hands clenched. "The degradation of your bodies is an indication of how weak that connection has become." Mewtwo hesitated and asked, "You knew that this would happen and didn't tell us?" "Although I had theories and suspicions, there was only one way to be certain. Regretfully, they turned out to be more accurate than I thought. The rate of deterioration and the severity of the side effects were both faster than I had anticipated." The room fell silent. That, along with the fatigue from your chosen career path, put you in much more danger than I intended, and for that, I must apologize. Well, Naruto spoke hesitantly at first. It's not like you were trying to kill us. Sasuke shouted accusingly. That still doesn't explain why didn't you tell us what was going on. Even if it had only been subconsciously, you would have fought the effects if I had told you. Any findings would have been risky to use as a foundation and would have been erroneous. Sakura said, so, what do we do now? Your Poke copyright mon will stay with you from now on. Just like it did the first time the three of you called upon it, this should cause the power of dominance to stabilize across the tie you share. You will suffer comparable repercussions if you are ever absent from them for an extended amount of time. Puzzled, Naruto said, wait, I thought you wanted Poke copyright mon to remain a secret? Any secret will eventually come to light, regardless of how well it is kept. It was only a question of time until someone found out that you three had found the vault. Even though we might not be able to hide ourselves indefinitely, we can have some control over who finds out about us first. Therefore, working with your third Hokage would be the ideal starting point. Naruto swung his feet over the side of his bed and exclaimed, all right, let's go find the old man. The god of shinobi himself entered their hospital room as the door abruptly sprang open. Naruto, that won't be required. He has already arrived. As he passed through the Konoha State Hospital corridor, Hiruzen Sarutobi let out a sigh. He played with his treasured wooden pipe, which he usually smoked, in his hands. No matter how much the senior shinobi wanted the comforting fumes of smoking after the events of the previous week, he would have to do without it because smoking was strictly prohibited in all Konoha hospitals. The disappearance of Team 7 had left a trail of discontent in its wake. Once again, a whole Anbu subdivision was deployed to search the hidden leaf for any more hiding places that Sarutobi's deceased student might have hidden. Due to the designated ninja being taken away to assist in the search, clients of many time-sensitive assignments had to receive refunds. Other shinobi villages were beginning to hear about the disturbance, and to make matters worse, Itachi Uchiha had been sighted barely 20 miles from Konoha. The third Hokage removed his hat and combed through his remaining hair. Something in Hiruzen's bones warned him that this was just the beginning, even though everyone hoped for the opposite. He let out another sigh and moved on to the last stop of his tour. For now, that was the only thing he could do. As he strolled, Sarutobi couldn't help but wonder why he had delayed this room so much. The only thing that prevented him from spending the entire day with them, as he knew Kakashi had done, was his responsibilities as Hokage. Actually, the man would have stayed up all night keeping watch over them if he hadn't ordered the Junin to go home and rest. He now nearly regretted doing so because Sarutobi had grown to value the man as a confidant over the years. Maybe he could have explained the small voice in the back of his mind that warned him not to enter the room where Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura were. The third Hokage realized right away that something was off when he turned the corner into the hall where the children were being held. The faint light coming from their chamber was the first thing that caught his eye. To save more energy for vital sections like the intensive care unit, all Konoha hospitals implemented a lights.out policy at night. Naturally, this may be waived in the event of an emergency in a less critical wing, but Sarutobi didn't hear or see anything that would suggest such a situation. Of course, if not for the glow's characteristics, it could have been explained away as one of the genin merely turning on a light for whatever purpose. Rather of the constant illumination of a light bulb, this light fluctuated and danced like a little flame. Sarutobi walked discreetly towards the room's entrance to learn more about what was happening because there were still a lot of other plausible possibilities. As he approached silently, the hair on the back of Hiruzen's neck stood up. The sensation that something was watching him from just beyond his line of sight, scrutinizing everything he did, grew more intense as he approached the hospital room. The elder man swiftly used the concealment jutsu Jiraiya had taught him, pushing it away as best he could, and glanced through the wired window in time to hear Naruto's voice yell. 4 strange animals he had never seen before were present in the room with the members of Team 7. The biggest of them looked like a purple anthropomorphic cat and was floating about 2 feet in the air. The other 3 were in their beds with the kids, who appeared to be handling their presence pretty well. He would even add that Naruto and his were playing together, indicating that they were pleased to see them. Additionally, he saw that the flame burning on the tail of the one with Sasuke was the source of the light. The old man flared his chakra to ensure he had not been ensnared in an enemy's genjutsu because the scene was so bizarre. The 3 kids turned to face the bigger creature at that point. Then they started conversing with the cat, and it was responding in some way. The genin were able to converse with the creature despite the fact that it never produced any noise or gesture. He still gained knowledge from his observation, though. He really learned some extremely intriguing facts, like that the creatures were known as Pokemon and that they were the cause of Team 7's most recent hospitalization. Sarutobi made the decision to come out as Naruto let out a startled shout. The sensation in his head became a tangible presence at that same moment. As it attempted to establish mental contact with him, it brushed against his consciousness. The old man instantly blocked off all thoughts, denying the inquisitive ghost any chance to establish itself. It jabbed at his mental boundaries for a moment, then backed off a little. Hiruzen destroyed the disguise jutsu and strode into the room after securing his inner defenses. "Oh, hey, old man. We were just about to go and find you." In response to the blonde, Sarutobi said, "So I heard, Naruto." He kept his eyes fixed on the humanoid monstrosity before him the entire time. Mewtwo said with a cool nod, "I think it is reasonable to assume that you were able to both understand and communicate with me in some fashion." Sakura shifted restlessly in her bed and said, "Then I must ask that you come with me to be detained and questioned." His eyes hardened as the god of shinobi said, Mewtwo. Sensei says he can't do that." As he started to gather his chakra, he stated, "I'm afraid you do not have a choice." Furiously, Naruto waved his arms. "Whoa, hold on, old man. We can explain." "Silence, Naruto," yelled Sarutobi. "The three of you vanished for 4 days. During that time, you came into contact with this thing within one of Orochimaru's abandoned facilities. That short amount exposure ended with you utterly debilitated and near comatose. That is not to mention the fact that this creature seems to have at least partial telepathic powers, allowing it to influence if not simply control all three of you. I understand the situation well enough." Naruto succumbed to the third Hokage's warning. The creature did not answer, saying, "I will only ask once more. Surrender yourself peacefully or I will be required to use force." It was still not cooperating after a minute had gone by. "Very well." Hiruzen quickly went over a set of hand signals. But the beast launched a massive mental attack before he could complete the procedure. Sarutobi was immobilized by the concentration required to contain the overwhelming force. Like water over a rounded river rock, the psychological assault swept through his head. The monster was forced into a stalemate by the god of shinobi's strength. If the latter's attack weakened, he could execute the last seal of his jutsu, and if his will faltered in the least, the creature would undoubtedly establish itself and take complete control of his mind. The battle was clearly shaking Naruto, Sasuke, Sakura, and their Poke copyright mon around the two fighters. The third Hokage and Mewtwo were slowly being crushed by the immense, unrestrained force emanating from them, even though the conflict itself was invisible. There was a lot of energy in the air. When the tiles beneath Sarutobi's boots took on a faint blue outline before being torn out from under him, the impasse was finally broken. Astonished by his unexpected loss of balance, the guy collapsed to one knee while executing a dragon seal as Mewtwo's awareness penetrated his defenses. With a smack of his palms against the hospital floor, Hiruzen said, "Lightning style. Thunder binding jutsu." Electricity poured out of his hands. The energy bolts formed a three-sided barrier around the psychic Poke copyright mon by running up one of Sakura's and Sasuke's metal bedposts and used them as conductors. However, Mewtwo's use of his psychic power to immobilize the man cost the third Hokage dearly. Sarutobi's body would not obey any orders from his mind. "Enough." A deep, powerful voice reverberated in the old man's mind. "I do not wish for any blood to be spilled tonight." As the cat monster spoke to Sarutobi, his gaze was fixed on it. "We don't have enough time to talk about everything that has to be discussed. I wanted to let go of you, but you have to make a commitment to listen to me and not ignore me first. If not, I will continue to voice my opinion and you will continue to be subjugated. Even if it makes you feel better, I'll stay in this prison you made." Sarutobi considered his choices. There was no doubt that someone else sensed what had just occurred and alerted others. If an Anbu unit was already en route here, he wouldn't be shocked. But he had no idea how much the monster could say. The wisest course of action for him would be to give in and wait. Naturally, that would be useless in this case, though, as the creature was now listening to everything he thought. Hiruzen ultimately made his choice and could only hope it would not backfire. Sitting in their beds, Sakura, Sasuke, and Naruto quietly recovered from the battle of wills they had just witnessed. Poke copyright mon and shinobi engaged in lengthy conversations about a wide range of subjects. Mewtwo told the Hokage about Poke copyright mon's past and how the power of dominance came to be. He was also told by the psychic type what had actually transpired when Team 7 vanished. Sarutobi had lighted his pipe and settled into a neighboring chair while they were talking. Hospital regulations be damned, he needed the nicotine to help him digest what he was hearing. When the two had finished speaking, the old guy sat back in his chair and exhaled a cloud of smoke from his nostrils. In fact, 4 Anbu had arrived, but Sarutobi had made a move for them to stand down. It was the most logical explanation for all that had happened over the last week, no matter how ridiculous what he was being told looked. Immortality had always been Orochimaru's goal, and the abominations he produced were always a byproduct of that pursuit. In that context, the development of whole new species seemed highly implausible, particularly given his limited time and resources. Because there were just more effective and superior ways for shinobi to spy on each other. The same logic disqualified the participation of another shinobi village. Why would they do such a complex ruse and then put their inventions on 3 just graduated genin if it were some other third party? He needed more evidence, but he was beginning to believe Mewtwo. You mentioned your vault was hidden within the village. Would you allow a team chosen by me to examine its contents and records? No more than 3 people, and only under my supervision. They are not permitted to take anything out of the vault. I will only present enough documentation to support my story. Sarutobi noted that Inoichi Yamanaka should personally lead the team and stated, agreed. After then, the room was silent for a few minutes as the Hokage considered the circumstances. Before he spoke again, he hummed softly and thoughtfully. In the morning, I shall begin the process of designating Poka Copyright Mon as a new type of summons. This will allow me to severely punish any who try to tamper with anything related to your species without your consent. It will also allow you to have access to certain village resources. I can have one of the children deliver the specifics to you to look over before I finalize it. That's okay, Mewtwo replied. Sarutobi cracked his back and got to his feet. As he turned toward the entrance, the electromagnetic barrier that had encircled the legendary vanished. He turned to face the kids who had been observing the events, looking back over his shoulder. I suggest the 3 of you get some rest as you can. Tomorrow will be a busy day for all of us.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.